Hey everybody, it's Jim of Animated Educated. Today you're going to meet Dion Labriola, who is the director of a film, a documentary called Dear Ike, The Lost Letters to a Teen Idol. This is a personal documentary that he did a few years ago, and it's going to be shown on PBS. If you go to PBS SoCal website, you can find it there. It's free. You can watch it there. So please enjoy this interview with Dion Labriola.
June 23rd, 1980. Mom mailed Ike's letter. I can't wait for it to get back.
The dream of Dion was an animated movie.
So welcome to Animated Educated, and I don't want to reveal too much of the film because it's really a good, it's a very nostalgic film, and it's a very touching film at the end, especially. And I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll let you start it off. You want to?
Okay, well, I'll watch what I say then as well. So yeah, when I had some time off from my editing career, I was like, I'll just do this 20-minute little film, and it'll be a fun little excursion. It has turned into be this huge thing that. Yeah, I wasn't anticipating that it would be an hour, and I wasn't anticipating that it would be years in the making. Because I started it in the beginning of 2017, actually. And then I decided, once I'd shot everything, to animate some of it, which, that took forever. So I finally finished it at the end of 2019, and then 2020 came around, and the whole world just, exploded. So there was that in there too. The basic story is it was actually after Escape Twitch Mountain came out, but yeah, that's I think his most famous role, his kind of iconic role. When I would tell people I was doing a documentary about Ike Eisenmann, I'd always get, "Oh, I don't know who that is," and then I'd show them a picture. Oh, yeah. Every time, no one knew his name. And that's actually in the film. When I first decided that I wanted to work with him as a 13-year-old, I just knew he was the kid from Escape Twitch Mountain. I didn't know his name. And that was a process just to find out his name back then, because things were different back then. In junior high, I came up with this idea for a book, which then I decided I should make into a movie. Not then, but in the future, but I started planning it, it's far in advance. And for some reason, I decided at one point that Ike Eisenmann should be one of the star voices in the film.
When I saw that Double Mint commercial, I knew you had to be in one of my movies.
And that just turned into this long journey of trying to get in touch with him to try to cast him, basically, which turned out to be much more difficult than I ever thought it would be, or it ever should have been. And definitely much more difficult than it would be now, considering he's on Twitter. You could just, he's on Instagram, he's on Facebook. He's much more accessible now than he was as a kid.
We grew up about the same era, I think, when and yeah, I mean, you just had to kind of hunt him down however you could in any magazine or article or anything.
I tried everything. I really did.
It's fun to watch this in the film, how you go from just writing him all the time and hear frustration.
July 3rd, getting impatient about Ike's letter.
It was a little frustrating for him because I didn't respond.
March 18th, no damn letter.
And the frustration made the obsession even crazier.
Went to get 16 magazine, big article on Ike Eisenmann is going to be on. Return from Witch Mountain is going to be on the movie channel. His father is in it too.
It was started with a series of drawings that I did in study hall, because I was, back then you would have one period a day, 45 minutes to an hour, that was for study hall, where you just went in and did your homework, or just goofed around most of the time, and I would draw, because that's what I did in my spare time since I was a kid. and I just drew these characters. It was once a day for like months. And for some reason, I think it was for a English class, I had to come up with a story, and I decided to make a story with some of these characters. And then it just developed and snowballed from there into, okay, well, it's going to be a novel. It's going to be animated film.
I really want to find out about Milno.
I just thought, Dion, if you go around talking about this movie, you're going to further alienate yourself and become even dorkier than you already are. Stop talking about Milno.
I decided he was actually a wizard, because a lot of this was inspired by The Hobbit, which I had just kind of discovered in 7th grade, kind of invaded my brain. And also Star Wars was that same year. So that kind of, science fiction fantasy stuff was what I was aspiring to. So yeah, Milno was, for some reason, had special powers. I came up with a reason for him to have special powers at the end of the book, and I don't know what it was about him. I just thought he was the hero of the story, I guess. So I kind of played him up, and he became kind of the star in my mind, at least.
And then you had another character named Simon O, as in O with an E at the end, silent E, I guess.
Well, yes. After I came up with the idea for the first film. Of course, every film has to have a sequel. So I started coming up with all these characters, and there wasn't really a story, but I knew there had to be a sequel, just for marketing purposes. And so there was this. I came to make it even better. I had a whole series of these wizards. There were like 10 of them, and yeah, that's the character I decided that Ike should play for. I don't know why.
Perfectly fantastic idea to me, and I was sure that he would think it was a fantastic idea too, and write me right back.
I assure you, this will go down in history as one of the best, if not the best, animated movies of all time.
And now I want to let everybody know that if you go to the SoCal website, they have it posted. They have your whole film up there. I watched it last night. And they're also going to be showing it for Pride Week, June 8th at 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, PBS SoCal Plus. And it's also going to be on June 29th at 4 p.m. SoCal World.
That was a big advantage, I think, of going with PBS, is it just lives on the app for forever right now. So anybody across the country, whenever they want, can just go watch it for free.
So we both kind of watched Witch Mountain in different states, I guess. I was in Florida, you were in Ohio. And then Turn to Witch Mountain comes back with Betty Davis and Christopher Lee. And I always wanted to find out what Ike thought of, if he worked with them and how he felt about them.
Oh, he worked pretty closely with Betty Davis. I mean, you see the film, there's a lot of scenes of, he kind of split up with his sister, who was played by Kim Richards. Yeah, he spends most of the movie with Christopher Lee and Betty Davis. Yeah, he really enjoyed working with Betty Davis. I mean, there are stories of her just being difficult, but he was a kid, and I think she was just. But yeah, he's got great stories about working with Betty.
And then also in the film, I think before all this, we find out about his dad, Albert Abel. He was an actor, and he was pretty successful in Texas. He did like a cable.
Yeah, a kids show. Yeah, a daily kids show. He was on there a lot.
It's fun to see the footage of him as a little kid on his dad's show.
That came about when Ike showed up for the interview. He actually lives in Florida now, but he came to California for a screening of The Wrath of Khan, which he's also in. And we decided to interview him on that trip. And before the interview, he was like, I just stumbled upon this footage. It's backstage footage that someone was filming of the Cadet Don show. He's like, I thought you might be able to use it. I was like, yes, get it to me now. Because it was a live show back in the early 60s. So they didn't videotape it at all. I don't know if there's any existing footage of the actual show. That was like somebody kind of shooting from off on the side of the set. So I think that might be the only footage of the Cadet Don show, which was huge in Houston.
I remember as a kid there was the the Hanna-Barbera show Harlem Globetrotters.
Uh-huh.
I remember as a kid I drew them, and I guess my mom sent it to them or sent it somehow, but it ended up one day I just got this thing in the mail, and it was my drawing, and it had a photograph of the Harlem Globetrot, the real guys, not the cartoon, which was which was really funny because I was kind of still that age where I'm like, wait a minute.
I thought they were cartoons.
Yeah, I was like, where's Granny? Where's that lady? You know, or
It's so odd how a childhood brain works, you know. Like,
Yeah.
well, I say in the film, part of the appeal of Escape Twitch Mountain was he and his sister have magic powers, and I just, you know, at that age, I just assumed that he, as a real person, had magic. It's like, I want to be friends with this guy,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Did you go to the Cleveland Car Show? Is that right? Or
You know, there are a lot of things that I did to try to find his contact information that I didn't even make the film, but that one was so goofy that I had to include it. Yeah, because I had, like, in my head, I had a pretty much like a Excel spreadsheet of all the shows he had been in and all the actors he had worked with. So I knew that he had been in Chips, and at the Autorama was, you know, once a year in Cleveland, and they would always have like some TV stars show up, you know, and sign autographs. And this year I saw the ad in the Akron paper that Larry Wilcox was going to be there. And I was like, oh, Larry has worked with Ike, you know, they must be good friends. I'm sure they see each other on a daily basis. He has his contact info. So I went to the Autorama. My parents drove me up to Cleveland, and all I can remember, it was in February. So of course, you know, it's freezing cold outside, so you have your winter jackets. And then we got inside, it was like 90 degrees. So that's the memory that's really stuck with me about that day. I was just sweating bullets waiting to talk to Larry Wilcox with, you know, 16 magazine in hand. And like going over the story, okay, how am I going to tell Larry Wilcox why I need to get in touch with Ike Eisenmann? And looking back, he could have just been like, get out of my kid, that's just ridiculous. But he was, you know, I'm not sure exactly what I told him, but he was like, oh yeah, let me think about it. And that was the closest brush with Hollywood that I, you know, from when you're growing up in Akron, you know, that just seemed like a world away. So to actually, wow, he was in the same state as me, you know.
Right.
I had to see if he had the magic answer.
Yeah. So you were one of my, you know, animation students. You turned out pretty good. So yeah.
That's another thing that is just crazy how much that has changed. You know, because at the Cleveland Institute of Art, they didn't even have you couldn't even major in film, let alone animation. But now they've got like an animation program, and you know, it's every school has an animation program now. It's just crazy. Back then, it was just like I would in high school when it was time to actually think about, okay, how am I going to do this without Ike Eisenmann? You know, in the real world, how am I going to become an animator? So my art teacher had all these catalogs from schools, you know, art schools across the country, and I would just, you know, look through them all, and to find one that had an animation program was not easy. So I ended up at the Cleveland Institute of Art and then transferred to the Art Institute of Chicago, and ended up kind of veering off into the world of video, which was back then, it was kind of new, you know, relatively. And, you know, I kind of and it was big, and at the School of the Art Institute, they had a big video program. So I ended up getting into that. And that kind of led me to get a job at a video bar, a nightclub in Chicago called Berlin that I think a lot of people will know. And they were known for their music videos, and they had like a little editing system in the DJ booth. So that kind of, my knowledge of video helped me get a job there. And after years of working there, I decided, well, you know, I'm still interested in animation. I never really studied it deeply, although I'd always dabbled in it. I'd done a music video that's in the film for the Thrill Kill Cult. That was a Chicago band that's all 90% animated. I was like, well, you know, I should probably brush up on my animation skills. So that's how I decided to get back to Columbia and ended up in your class.
That's amazing. And I didn't even know about the whole, you know, Milno or any of that stuff.
No, that was, I mean, that
kinda,
was kind of all in my past at that point. I had,
yeah.
you know, had different characters and visions of where that was going to lead me. I think the move to LA kind of started with the classes at Columbia, because I took yours, and then Stan Hughes, I took a class with him, whatever, like, you know, drawing for animation 2, I think was his class. Or
Yeah.
And yeah, and he was always like, Dion, when are you gonna get a job? And I'm like, well, I have a job. And you know, I was working as a VJ, but I was also kind of the head of the video department at Berlin at that point, so I had a full-time job. So I was kind of taking classes thinking, you know, someday I'll use this. And then it came to a point where I decided to move on from the nightclub career that I had. And I was like, well, if I really want to pursue this, I think probably moving to LA is the right thing to do. And the funny thing is, when I moved here, I did it with the idea that I wanted to, you know, work in animation. And, you know, once again, the world kind of intervened, and I ended up back in the world of video again, and became a video editor. You know, I'd gotten a job at a production company, and back then the state of California had you could take classes for free in your chosen field. So one weekend I took a Maya class and an Avid class. And the Maya, the 3D animation class, I just was like, I just don't, this does not work in my head. You know, I mean, I loved the things people were doing in Maya, but it just, it did not jive with me. I just couldn't. But the Avid class, I was like, oh, I love this. This is right up my alley. So at that point, I kind of decided to shift again and pursue the editing thing, which is what I did up until the point I started working on this movie.
All the animation in the film that you did that. What program did you use?
I use Animate, you know, which most people know used to be Flash.
Mm-hmm.
I learned basically because I had all these drawings that I'd done in your class, but I'd never like transferred them to cells and inked and painted them and turned them into anything that anybody could watch. So I was like, well, I got a computer, like, I don't know, 1999, I think. And it's like, oh, maybe there's something out there that I can finally have you know, I had this stack of, you know, 80 pounds of paper in my closet. So I scanned them all in, and Flash was the program I found. And I was like, oh, this is what I'll use. So I did. I turned like 3 walk cycles into a little film. And
I want to thank you for coming on Animated Educated, and you know, it's good to see you again, and
That's
you
great
know,
to see
all
you
that,
again.
and definitely, you know, we'll keep in touch, definitely, because you're in the same state. You're not in Ohio. I'm not in Florida, so you know, there you
Right,
go.
exactly.
Yeah. And I want to say, you know, remember, Dion, you always have magic on your side, you know.
Yes, we all do.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Dion Labriola. It's funny. I haven't seen him for like, I don't know, 35, 40 years back in Chicago when I was at Columbia College. And it was really good to see him again and to hear about his film. And you can check out Dear Ike if you go to the PBS SoCal website. And you can also go to the dearike.com website if you want to learn more about that. And if you enjoyed this interview in any way, please support this by pushing this button to subscribe, or you can leave a comment below. You can also go below and see some other interviews I've done. And here's a couple here that you might be interested in. And we'll see you next time on Animated Educated.